With Monsters Attack, TFT has finally dropped the 8th set. Whether you're already familiar with the basic mechanics or you're a complete beginner, this guide should help you quickly learn how to play TFT in set 8 and dominate more games. Teamfight Tactics is an auto battler, where you'll compete against 7 other opponents by building a team to be the last one standing. Your team will consist of units you can buy and place on the board, which you basically break down into their own categories. You have your most important units in your team, which are called carries, who deal the majority of your damage. Then you've got the tanks who serve as a shield and absorb all incoming damage for your carry to make sure your carry unit is protected. And then you've got your support or utility units who'll simply help you out with completing specific synergies or granting your team unique effects. To make sure we're not missing out on anything important, let's break down a game of TFT. When you start a game, you'll see a carousel with 9 units who are all of the same value, holding an item component. For this very first carousel encounter, the units are not really a priority, so you want to focus on getting a specific item component rather than a specific unit. After everyone picks a unit from that carousel, the first stage of the TFT game starts. This stage is the PvE round, where you won't fight against any of the players in your game and instead encounter minions. These minions drop a variety of loot, ranging from more item components, extra gold, or another form of gold by dropping you units of different values. The first PvE round can never be lost, but for the second round you want to play another unit to make sure you win that encounter. And this is where the shop comes into play. Every round, 5 champions will show up in the shop. Every shop has specific odds of what champions will appear in it, which you can always check on the bar on top of it. The odds in that bar tell you how likely it is for you to see champions of different values. These champions are the units you want to use to build your complete team step by step. Speaking of champions, as you can see, every champion has a unique value, class and origin, which displays the synergy or so-called traits of a champion. For a beginner, it's easiest if you try and pick a trait that not only has a high trait number, but also a good variety of champions with different values. For example, you could start by playing a full Star Guardian team. You'll have units of all categories and values like Lux, who can be your early game carry, Rel, who serves as your tank in the frontline, and then other supporting units such as Yuumi. Since you'll most likely find a Star Guardian of each different value with every single level up, it'll allow you to build up your Star Guardian team over the course of the game. We'd also recommend you try out other traits like Duelists, Laser Corps or Anima Squad for the beginning. Now that you know there are different champions with different cost values and traits, let's talk about the game mechanics. Augments are now a mechanic that will return with every TFT set, so you should definitely learn how to use them the right way. After the PvE round, when stage 2 begins, you'll have a choice between 3 different augments which buff your team in various different ways. There are 3 augment selection rounds in the game in total, and just like champions, augments have their own categories. Set 8 even introduces them with a new twist. So first off, you have Heart, Crest, Crown or Soul augments, which will simply help you reach a higher ceiling of a specific trait. You then have Economy augments that will grant you gold, which helps you build your team even faster, but more on that later. You also have Combat augments, which will simply boost up the stats of your team and make it more powerful. On a side note, if you don't really know which augment to take, we just recommend you to pick any of those combat augments, since they're usually your safest bet. Lastly, there's also a new augment feature called Hero augments. Think of hero ones like combat augments, which are just focused around a specific unit in play. Every champion has a 1 carry hero augment that mainly buffs up only that specific champion, and 1 support hero augment that will help your entire team. Janna's support augment, for example, doubles her forecaster's effect, whilst her carry one restores tons of mana with each enemy hit by her twister, turning her into a bit of a utility machine for your team. With 59 champions in the game, there are more than 100 hero augments in play, which makes each game a unique experience on its own. And to make sure you always know which hero augment to play, you can always follow along with our free Set 8 overlay. It'll show you which team comps are considered the strongest in the current patch and helps you choose the right heroes to play around. So make sure you check it out and bring it with you into your next game by clicking the link in the description. Now that you've picked your item component from the carousel, fought against an entire PvE stage to drop more loot or gold, and picked your very first augment, you'll start to engage in combat against enemy players. Stage 2 is the very first PvP stage, and from here on out, you'll now lose health with every lost fight. Whenever you do win a fight though, you'll be rewarded with an additional 1 gold bonus at the end of that round. Every step in the game requires either gold or is somehow tied to it. Things start with each player having a base income of 5 gold each round. But since gold is such a key element to this game, a good player uses all sources available to generate extra gold. So let's actually have a look at how that works. As already mentioned, if you win a PvP round, you gain 1 extra gold. Then you have interest gold, which is based on your current amount of gold you have saved. If you have 9 gold saved up, you won't gain any interest. 10 gold will grant you 1 extra interest gold, 20 will get you 2 interest gold, and so on, with plus 5 gold being the limit at 50 gold saved. And then lastly, you can also generate extra gold through win streaking or lose streaking. And the rules for those streaks are very simple. You can only go on a win or a loss streak. A streak starts with you either winning or losing 2 fights in a row, granting you 1 additional extra gold. If you manage to win or lose 4 fights in a row, you'll gain 2 extra gold, and if you win or lose 5 fights or more, you'll gain 3 extra gold. For the entirety of stage 2, you should really try to go either on a complete 5 win or 5 lose streak, so you max up all of those gold returns. And you want to make the decision based on your first 2 fights and see how weak or strong your board is compared to others. Now that you know how to get rich,
I love gold!
You're going to need to learn how to spend it. Try to see it as a resource to always increase your team strength, whether it's for the next fight or a later stage in the game. Team strength can come in different ways, but it obviously starts with champions. Buying a unit from the shop gives you a 1-star copy of that unit on your bench. Buying 3 1-star copies will merge them into a single 2-star unit, which has increased stats and a much more powerful ability. The highest and strongest upgrade, however, is turning 3 2-star units into 1 3-star unit. A rule of thumb for the early game, and especially stage 2, is that 2-star units will often be stronger than any matching traits. If you have a 2-star unit on your bench that doesn't contribute to any traits you're currently running, you can always press the blue button in the shop to buy XP. This is going to level up your board and allow you to place additional units with every new level. Whilst you're leveling up, your chances of finding higher value units increase too, so your team grows in size and you'll get access to higher value units that are just simply stronger. Anyway, to get the maximum strength on your units, you're going to need items. Every individual unit can hold up to 3 completed items, and you need 2 item components to build 1 completed one. Just like units, items come in the same 3 categories: carry, tank and support items. As you might have guessed, your carry units want carry items, your tank units want tanky items, and so on. The item priority, however, though, is important, as you always want to have 3 completed items on your carry and tank first. Quite often you might find yourself with loads of different item components on your bench because one of our guides tells you which completed ones are the best for your specific carry. But just remember that most carries can wear a variety of items, so don't hesitate to look up alternative items or open up our item cheat sheet to check which items you could actually potentially build. Sure, some items synergize ultimately better than others on certain units, but a solid strategy is to never have more than 4 item components on your bench. Try sticking to this rule and don't overthink it too much. There are even strong standalone items like Sunfire Cape or Static Shiv that you can basically build on every single game. As previously mentioned, you'll get your first item components at the start of the game in the very first carousel. Your second components will drop randomly from the first stage during the PvE rounds. This pattern repeats itself with every stage, with only 2 differences that start with the second carousel. First, the units in the carousel will differ in value, and second, there is an order based on your health as to who gets to go when. The main takeaway for you is that you can actively choose which item components to take during the carousels, while you don't have any choice in the PvE rounds. Again, for this reason, when you encounter the carousel, in most cases you should choose the next component you need, not the units. So if you've followed along so far, you should have a really good setup for the most dynamic phase in the game, the mid game. It starts with stage 3, and by now you should already have everything that a team needs. Completed items, some gold in the bank, but also enough units on the board to form the first synergies. Now it's time to form a game plan to stick to have a clear vision for the rest of the game. If you haven't seen a hero augment during stage 2, you might see one in the second augment selection round during this stage. You could make your decision depending on the hero augment you pick, but ideally you make this decision based on the items you have. Remember, items are the least influential part for a player. Another good tip to keep in mind is that this set kinda lacks enough frontline units, so you should always try to build a team around strong frontliners like Annie, Alistair, Zoe and Echo. Another strong frontliner is a Mecha Prime set, as he'll have enough tankiness if you make him absorb 2 other mechas in Wukong and Jax. Playing around those tanky units only wants you to worry about adding more damage to your team. The easiest starter for a beginner though is to pick one team comp and play it repeatedly every single game, to force you to get the hang of it. This could be something like an easy supers comp which wants you to 3-star as many units as possible to maximise your team's strength. Let's say you're deciding to play supers now. That comp is a so-called slow roll comp, and is considered the easiest style of play. You don't level up, you don't really slam items, you basically just make sure you get gold as soon as possible by playing a weak board to lose the first fights on purpose. This will grant you a couple of benefits right from the start. You'll get extra gold from going on a full 5 lose streak, and this way you can go for the perfect items on your carries, as you'll be the first to go during carousel rounds. Economy augments are often a huge help hit, then you continue lose streaking until you hit 50 gold at around the start of stage 3. There you want to stay at level 5, 6 or 7 depending on which carries you want to play. Supers reroll, for example, wants you to 3-star as many units as possible, which is done with the lowest value units easiest. To pull off a supers comp strategy, you need to do the following. Stay at level 5 and 6 for most of the game, and stay above 50 gold at all times. Then you hit refresh to buy units you need like Gangplank, Lee Sin and Malphite. Then when you're at 52 gold, you can stop hitting that refresh button and repeat in the next turn. And then you repeat the process again. If you are interested in another strong slow roll comp at higher levels, then we'd recommend to try something like a Steroids Vein on our tier list. A A slightly more difficult but more common strategy is to go for the default style of play. Since TFT is divided into stages, there is a certain level curve that will allow you to reach level 8 with a good amount of gold, in order to play around a powerful 4-cost carry. For this strategy, you can start the game with a strong win streak board by having 2-star units or a strong trait synergy such as Gadgeting from the get-go. If this is the case, you want to push to level 4 at stage 2-1 before the very first PvP fight, and then go to level 5 at stage 2-5 to maintain your win streak. If you expect your starter to be weak, then it's also fine to slow down and opt out for a 5 lose streak instead. That means, just like the slow roll strategy, lose your fights on purpose and don't level up at all. No matter which streak you went for though, you always want to push to level 6 at stage 3-2. Here you want to make sure you win your next fights, especially if you went for a lost streak to not lose out on any more health. Then save up gold until 50 again and push for level 7 at stage 4-1. Here you want to roll to find your 4-cost carry which your team is going to revolve around, like a Talia and a Spellslinger's comp for example. After hitting your carry and stabilizing, you then want to get back to 50 gold so you can push to level 8 at stage 5-1 to complete the rest of your team. If you are a complete beginner, we really recommend you to learn this strategy first before adapting to your own style of play. There's no good team in TFT though without proper positioning. Knowing when and how to place your units on the board can literally be a game changer. TFT is a dynamic game and you always have to adjust according to the positioning of your opponent's boards. So let's quickly break down the basics. The front line of your board is the very first row. This is where those tanks belong. The most common tanks in the current set are defenders, brawlers and mascots. The last row of the board, and especially the hexes second to the corners, are the so-called carry hexes. The reason you don't want to put your carry in the corner of a board is because it allows you to outplay mechanics such as Talon's ability or a Blitzcrank hero augment, which pulls your carry into the enemy lines. But all the carry positioning is in vain if we don't fill the corners with bait units. So always make sure you have other ranged units next to your carry that aren't quite as important. Lastly, we also have support units who you want to place around your carries, as they serve as a secondary shield after your tanks in your frontline fall down. But there's a lot more to this game. If you want to stay ahead of everyone else and be the first to discover the strongest team comps, then you should check out our brand new app for TFT. Not only will you get the best team comps from our challenger experts straight into your game, but it will give you even more features that will guide you through each stage of the game and help you conquer the TFT meta.